Welcome to the Aura Room, a sacred space for soulful conversations, intuitive insights, and the unseen energies that shape our well being. I'm your host, Archita, and today's episode invites you to step gently beneath the surface into the place where real change begins. We are exploring the conscious and subconscious mind and how they influence our wellness, our patterns, our relationships, and why healing often doesn't start with effort but with awareness. My guest today is Anna Machkalov, certified hypnotherapist, healer, and guide for inner transformation. Anna's journey is powerful and unique. Before stepping fully into hypnotherapy, she spent over 22 years running a high volume cosmetic medical practice in Beverly Hills, witnessing firsthand how emotional stress, self image, and unresolved inner narratives deeply affect physical healing. What called her deeper was a truth she couldn't ignore. Real transformation begins in the subconscious mind. Trained at the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, the nation's only accredited hypnotherapy college, Anna now helps people heal anxiety, trauma, sleep issues, relationship struggles, and personal blocks by working with the mind beneath the mind. This conversation is about listening to what's unseen and learning how to heal from the inside out. So let's enter the Aura Room together. Anna, welcome to Aura Room. It's a pleasure to host you.
Thank you, Archita. It is my honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So, Anna, let's start with the basics. You say that real change begins at the subconscious mind. So, for someone new to this work, how would you describe the difference between the conscious and the subconscious mind?
Of course, of course. So here, if I can ask, if you can even imagine in your mind's eye a picture, if you can imagine a circle, and in this circle, if you can imagine that that circle is your full mind. And the only thing a human being is born with, a baby is born with, every human being on the planet is what we call the primitive mind, and that holds our fight, flight, freeze reflex. We've all heard of the fight or flight reflex. Everything else is a learned behavior. So, from about 0 until 8 is when our programming starts coming on board. We start developing our subconscious mind, our programming. Usually, our primary caregivers, in most cases, that's our mother, will start giving us this is a dog, this is a cat, this is a piece of cake. Somebody hugs you, you like this person. We don't really question things at this point. From about 0 until 8, we just start programming the computer. And this is why we say that kids are like a sponge. We just absorb, absorb, absorb. Then from about 9 years old, 8, 9 years old, we start developing what we call the prefrontal cortex, that ability to have logic, reasoning, willpower, decision making. All of that is what constitutes the conscious mind. So when you talk about the logic, the reasoning, the willpower, the conscious mind, all of that equals to about 12% of our mind power. Everything else, which equals to about 88%, which you can see is the majority of our mind, is the subconscious mind, is the programming, is that deep seated reasoning why we do something. And a lot of times, it is what holds our reasons for being in our own way, reasons for self-sabotage, reasons for reacting in certain ways rather than taking the pause and really acting from a better, more conscious, thought out space. So when you talk about the basics and the difference of conscious versus subconscious, we're talking about your conscious mind, logic, reasoning, willpower being about 12%. Everything else is your subconscious. So that will tell you exactly how strong and how powerful that subconscious is.
Wow, that was a very beautiful explanation. And yeah, it kind of, I kind of got what I was looking for actually. So basically, to our listeners, subconscious mind is, it's something that it's like a background video that keeps on playing Right? Am I right, Anna? It's like that, right?
It keeps on playing, and it also keeps on, making a lot of the decisions before we even logically, unless we actually take that pause and unless we actually do something to change the behavior, because behavior essentially is all habits. Everything is learned. And so if we do it without thinking about it, which is essentially unconscious behavior, which is essentially subconscious, all of that is just it's a unconscious, subconscious, another word for it, but yes, it's essentially things that we do without even really thinking. It's just automatic.
Exactly. So the subconscious is something that's always there. Got it. And yeah,
And
thanks for
otherwise, if we would have to relearn how to tie our shoes, how to walk, how to, put on our to get dressed and to do all of this. So, we operate most of the time from the moment we open our eyes in the morning until we go to sleep. The majority, about, 90% of what we do, 80-90% of what we do is from that subconscious programming. And that's why we think that we are very much making decisions, but a lot of our decisions are already made. A lot of our ways of operating throughout the day are already predetermined.
yeah, that makes so much sense. But that also makes me curious, Anna. Why do you think so many people feel stuck even when they understand what they need to change?
That is honestly, I will tell you, is a pretty, not to oversimplify it, but to put it in a simple way, it's because the brain's job solely, only, and specifically is to keep you safe. It is not designed for happiness, it is designed for safety. And so if we grew up around chaos, as an example, if we grew up around things that have been loud in the household, chaotic, we didn't, we grew up around not being healthy, making bad choices, the brain, because we have a thing called homeostasis, wants to keep it the same, because the idea of change is possibly, unsafe. And so because the brain only needs to keep you safe, it will keep you in self-sabotage mode as long as it can, until you can do something to bypass that filter, so to speak, that thinks, is there a congruency between my conscious desires and my subconscious programming? And this is where my work comes in, the hypnotherapy, because we speak directly to that programming so that you don't self-sabotage, so that you don't have time to logically, think your way out of your success.
Wow, that makes so much sense. It's like awareness opens the door, but the subconscious decides whether we actually walk through it.
It's a
So
very good way of putting it, yes.
yeah. So moving on, Anna, you have spent years in cosmetic medicine, where where people often focus on external change rather than the internal factors. So, what did that experience teach you about inner wellness?
It's interesting because, the way I look at it is, yes, essentially I was in cosmetic medicine, but the human being is a multidimensional creature. We're not just one-sided. And so oftentimes when you look at the reason behind somebody wanting to make, because, cosmetic surgery, unless you have some kind of a trauma that is, an accident or something, that is reconstructive in nature. It's all a choice. It's all a matter of choice. And so when you distill it down to human choice, you start asking yourself, what is the reason? Is it something? Is it an insecurity? Is it a lack of confidence? Is it a lack of, ABC? Could be so many different things, but it's not, nobody really needs it unless it's a reconstruction. And so it all boils basically down to that. So in my 23 years, many, many times it was about really just kind of understanding the motivation behind why somebody wants to get a change, why somebody is sitting in front of you, um and so in that sense, yes, I did kind of, take part in really understanding the psyche, take part in really understanding human motivation behind doing what they do, which kind of led me down this path.
That's interesting. But what did you observe in all of your experience? What is that one common thing that you observed in your patients?
The one common thing I observed is that we all need to get out of our own way. We all need to get out of our own way, whether it's an emotional thing, whether it's a physical thing. Most of the things that hold a human being back is standing in our own way. A lot of our power, not to sound like a cliche, but it's all within us. And so the moment a person can understand that the power to change, the power to change isn't just in a scalpel or in a surgical procedure. The power to change, because you've got so many people that have surgery and they still are unhappy inside. And so you ask yourself, what is the underlying factor? That's the psyche. That's getting out of your own way. That's really understanding your motivations for doing what you're doing, rather than thinking that if I just change my nose, or if I just change my eyes, or if I just change another a body surgery, or whatever it happens to be. I think that we all need to really pause and look within and look at our motivations of why we are doing what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true because I've seen people, who kept fixing the outside, like you just said, whether it be a body surgery, a rhinoplasty or whatever, but they still felt unsettled inside. And what you said, it feels, deeply relevant, especially in a world where appearance is praised, but emotional truth is often hidden. So I think that the fixing needs to be internal firstly before they work on the outside. But yeah, to each of their own. So yeah, I think what you just said it really resonated with me.
Yeah, yeah. And and also in the same fashion, I think understanding the beauty of the human being is that we have so many different sides. And I think if you're the more we can approach healing from a holistic standpoint, and from a standpoint of, as an example, I work closely with a lot of psychotherapists. So, because the psychotherapist essentially works with the conscious mind and I work with the subconscious, we work with the whole brain as a whole. And so, in that sense, you can look at the human being also in that sense, that whether you're working on the physical appearance, whether you're working on the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, it's all different aspects of the beautiful whole. And so, if you're able to say it's not just tweaking one little aspect, it's really looking at it as a whole, not on a micro, but on a macro. Look at it really from a holistic standpoint and say, okay, even if I'm working with a psychotherapist, how can that psychotherapist then work with my hypnotherapist, then maybe talk to my trainer, then maybe speak with, and then everybody's on a team. And then you're looking at yourself as a whole, as opposed to just, let me fix my eyes and then I think I'll be happy, or let me fix my nose and then I think I'll fix all my issues. Do you understand?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that everything is just so interconnected. So moving on, Anna, you work in hypnotherapy currently, and hypnotherapy is sometimes misunderstood by the society. So, what actually happens during a hypnotherapy session? If you could just explain for our listeners.
Such an excellent, excellent question, Archita, because so many people have this misconception and they think that hypnotherapy, they're going to lose control. That's the biggest fear, is people think that hypnotherapy is loss of control, because they think somebody's going to make you divulge your secrets, make you, quack like a duck or bark like a dog. That is stage hypnosis. And yes, there is stage hypnosis. And that's a whole other thing than therapeutic hypnotherapy. No, everything we do is to gain control, whether it's of your emotions, your, confidence, your body, your mind, your actions. Everything is to gain control. So as a client comes in, we first go through a period of speaking, just like this. We talk, we understand what the motivation is, we try to understand as much about the presenting issue as possible. But hypnotherapy, unlike regular therapy, works symptomatically. So hypnotherapy works with the symptoms. So if you can't sleep, we work with helping you sleep. If you have anxiety, we help you with that moment when you're feeling anxious. It's working with the symptom, with the feeling, with the behavior, with changing that. So you're never out of control. you're never asleep, if you feel, if you're always completely hearing everything that is going on and are aware. Sometimes some clients go in very, very deeply. The depth of trance is individual, client to client, but that doesn't mean that if your depth wasn't on a specific level that you didn't get the benefit of hypnotherapy, because remember, the conscious mind can be sitting and thinking of your laundry list and your grocery list. Your subconscious mind is the part I'm working with, and that part is listening. That part is the part I'm working with, and it's getting all the benefit, even if you are in your own way during session overanalyzing, because, we tend to have monkey mind and the mind tends to run around, especially for those that are not active meditators, active, you know, uh, people that do that kind of hypnotherapy, meditation, if you're not used to quieting your mind that way, you might feel initially like you're either not doing it correctly or you're, one or the other. But it's essentially a very narrow focused mind frame and a very relaxed body. So, a quick example would be, you're watching a movie and you get very, very into it. You get so into it that you start crying. You start crying because you're so emotional. Well, your mind knows it's not real, but your emotions don't. Your subconscious doesn't. So that's hypnosis. You're driving in your car, you miss your exit because you're so deep in a specific thought. In that moment, you're suggestible, you're hypnotized, so it's real. Hypnosis is essentially just the mind being really, really focused, the body being really relaxed, but the key is that makes it different than, let's say, a guided meditation, is that what I do is very, very unique and specific to each individual client. It takes in your neuro language into consideration. I take in, are you, what your suggestibility is. Are you more specific? Are you indirect? How do you take in suggestions? Because if you don't speak English, I can't speak to you in English, if that you understand. So we each take in information uniquely. And so this is the difference in doing hypnotherapy with someone who, like me, or, doing like a guided meditation on your own.
Well, that gives, a new perspective to hypnotherapy, to me as well as the listeners, I hope, because, it has been, I think, mostly the misconception is because of how hypnotherapy is often portrayed in, let's say, movies or, shows. So, yeah, even I used to think that it's something that a person brings something close to your face and you're hypnotized and you do everything they tell you to do. But wow, you just explained it so well. And I love that because it shows that healing that doesn't force the mind but gently works with it. So it puts the subconscious mind into play and let the conscious mind rest. So that
Absolutely.
yeah, so I think that's really helpful. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Anna. It's really helpful.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah. So, many of our beliefs were formed early in life. How do you think, like, how subconscious patterns show up in our adulthood? Is it similar to, childhood traumas? What do you think?
I think that everything, you cut out there for a split second, so hopefully I heard all of the question. But I think that if you're asking how is our programming similar from our childhood, like any trauma or anything else would be, our mind essentially is a computer's, right? So it's continually recording, recording, recording. The reason that we sleep is because we need to rest. The body needs to rebuild itself, right? So as the body sleeps and rebuilds itself, the mind is also doing its work. The subconscious mind is also doing a lot of important information while it's sleeping. So it's venting out a lot of stuff. So from the time we're kids, from the time we're born, essentially, our brain does this venting out process every night as we go. It's a process that it's like a filing cabinet. We go to sleep, the brain goes through its information, goes through its venting process, releases what it doesn't need so that we don't lose our mind, essentially, if I could put it in simple terms. This is why depressed people sleep a lot, because your brain is just overloaded and is just wants to process. So, That's one of the reasons. But essentially, everything from our childhood is a buildup, is a buildup, is a buildup. Everything is a learned behavior because remember, we're a blank slate. So whether you're talking about a trauma, whether you're talking about a behavior or repeating pattern, it's all learned. So the double-edged sword and the beauty is that if it's learned, it can be unlearned. If it's something that is a learned behavior, the idea is that you can unlearn it. But hypnotherapy comes in a sense that the brain doesn't work in a negative. So I can't tell you just don't do this, don't do this behavior, don't repeat this, because then if I tell you don't think of a blue elephant, what is the first thing on your mind, right? So the best thing that we do is we take out one thought, one pattern of behavior, and then we reintroduce another. And those neural pathways in the brain, that neuroplasticity, is what makes change possible, is what takes out that old programming from childhood and puts in the new programming without just saying, don't do this, because that's speaking with your conscious mind.
Yeah, that makes things so much clearer. But do you think that there is a specific age to reprogram those beliefs or behaviors?
No, I think that it does get I think it's very unique because there are people that are older that release certain patterns easier, and then there are people who are younger and didn't do a certain thing as long and they're holding on to it more. It all is really unique and it really depends on what again, the reason, what the secondary gain is of the behavior, what the reason is that somebody is doing something. Oftentimes we may have a pain in the stomach because we haven't worked through a certain anger. And so until we work through it, we're going to continually have this body syndrome, this secondary thing. There is no age limit to neuroplasticity. Of course, the more ingrained something is, the more you might need to kind of dig and peel those layers of the onion. But at the end of the day, the brain is the brain. Neuroplasticity still works, and you can still change that behavior if you are a willing participant. That's the key. Is it won't be done without your complete being on board.
That's so reassuring. It reminds us that we are not broken and we are just running kind of an old software that we just need to update. And it's never too late to reprogram those beliefs or behaviors from our childhood. So, yeah, that's really helpful. Now, before we wrap this up, Anna, I want you to suggest one small but powerful way that our listeners can start building a healthier relationship with their subconscious mind.
The one thing I would say is really be very, very aware of the words that come out of your mouth. Even something as simple as dropping something on your foot and saying, I'm so stupid. You know, the brain, remember, doesn't know the difference between you're just expressing in an outburst and you're actually saying something. And words, the more you say something, the more the brain hears it and register it. And because there's confirmation bias and because there's this, the brain wants to prove you right. And so the more it hears those words, the more it hears you speak negatively and saying, I'm this, I'm that, the more it's going to look for reasons to prove you're right. And this is why affirmations are so powerful. It's not just some woo woo, you speak positive things will happen. There is an actual scientific reason for it. It's because there's a part of your brain that looks for it, the confirmation bias that looks to prove you right. And so, if you've ever noticed you purchase a blue car, all of a sudden all the cars on the road are blue that you notice, it's this part of the brain. And so words are very powerful. The more that you speak in a certain way, the more the brain is going to look to prove you right. So it's, really speak in a way that you want to see your life, even if it's not that way. Fake it till you make it to a degree is really is a good term.
That's so true. I mean, our subconscious mind is just like a small child, and we should really mind what we say in front of them. So yeah, that feels like an invitation not to become someone new, but to finally come home to ourselves. And thank you for such an amazing conversation, Anna. I have learned a lot from this conversation, and I'm sure that our listeners have too. So, before we wrap this up, I'm sure they want to reach out to you, maybe learn more about, uh, hypnotherapy from you. So, if they want to do that, how can they reach out to you? Please share with them.
Yes, yes, yes. I would love to see and hear from everybody. And, it's my Instagram is Anna Machkalov hypnosis, which is ANNAMACHKALOV hypnosis. My website, which is ANNAMACHYPNOSIS.com. And just all the socials. If my name, just by my name, you'll be able to find me. And I would love to chat and, hear from all of your listeners. This is, as you can tell, I love this is a big passion. Hopefully you can tell.
I can definitely tell, and our listeners can too. I know that. So, yeah, I'll have all the details on my show listing, and our listeners can feel free to reach out to you whenever and however they want. So, dear listeners, as we close today's episode, let's take a moment to reflect on this. What belief have you been consciously trying to change that might need subconscious compassion instead? Now, here's the mini soul challenge for the week. Before sleeping each night, place a hand on your heart and gently say, I am safe to heal. I am open to change. No forcing, no fixing, just presence. Let your subconscious listen. And if this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who's healing quietly or feels like they are fine on the outside but searching for peace within. And don't forget to follow the Aura Room for more conversations that honor energy, intuition, and inner truth. Until next time, trust your inner world. It's always speaking. This is Archita, and you have been listening to the Aura Room.